Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I tend to talk about sex education stuff around here and sex in general and welfare topics. So subscribe, stick around, you might learn a thing or two. Today I'm going to talk about a story which has been going around for about a month or two now. There was a study done actually over in the United States, but it's been shown to be true here in the UK as well, where the number of people who are reporting that they haven't had sex in the last year is going up, and particularly it's going up for millennials, so those aged between 19 and about 36. And there's been a lot of speculation about why this is the case. Now, as we know, millennials are the generation which grew up with computers, and the slightly younger members grew up with social media and the internet as well. So the thinking is that social media has a part to play in young people not having as much sex as before. That's in comparison to young people about 10 or 20 years ago. The argument goes that because the primary reason for people to interact is for intimacy, that can be not just boyfriend and girlfriends and sex and all the rest of it, but just having friends, having close friends which you can confide in. Previously, that meant that you had to talk to people in person. Even with the advent of emails and pen pals and things like that, you hardly had loads of pen pals. You had one or two, and you weren't likely just to email people about your intimate confiding details. It was much more likely that you would physically go and talk to your friends, and particularly a few of your very close friends. Whereas now, you are quite likely to start confiding in people on the internet, partly because of YouTube. You're watching me, partly because you're interested in this subject, yeah? When it comes to social media, you talk to people, on messengers or on like WhatsApp or some other platform where you're not physically face to face with this person. In some ways, it makes talking to them easier. Great. But you lose that intimacy. And the theory goes that this has a knock-on effect. You're less likely to go out and talk to people, therefore you're less likely to have intimacy, therefore less sex. Whereas in real life friendships, you have more intimacy and therefore more sex. And I'm not the only one to say this. I mean, Casey said this yesterday.
Real life friendship can lead to intimacy, which can lead to sex. But social media friendships can equal less intimacy, which can equal less sex.
You see? Told you. But you see, I don't really buy this. It's not a good enough explanation, in my opinion. Partly because social media also is used by people over the age of 36. Hey, just look on Twitter. How old's Donald Trump? But mostly because I think there's actually a bunch of other reasons why young people are less likely to have sex than they were before. Chief among which is better sex education. So back in like the 60s and 70s, when the previous generation was growing up, you had kind of adequate to poor sex education. It was mostly based around don't do it. Never stopped anybody. If you do it, make sure you're married first. That wasn't going to stop anybody either. Oh, and by the way, if you do it, then remember that you're going to catch all these infections. So it scared the hell out of people and then didn't stop them having sex. But what was chiefly not taught was things over consent and women actually be able to refuse sex. Wasn't really taught. It was kind of expected that the woman would go along, and therefore the teaching to the guys, what they were taught, maybe not directly, but what they got from the situation was that if the woman didn't say no, then they can go ahead, why not? Now, whilst sex education has a long way to go, not least here in the UK, but over in the States as well, there is better sex education, especially in the more affluent and metropolitan areas. So yes, consent is taught. Also, there's better teaching around contraception. Now, you might expect people to have more sex with better contraception, but if you think about it, often the problem is that there is no contraception. So whereas before you might say, oh, just go ahead anyway because you didn't really have the knowledge about the consequences as you should do, now better informed people, better informed young people when it comes to the consequences of having sex without contraception means that they're less likely to have unprotected sex. But I actually think that the main reason why young people are having less sex is simply because they're actually a bit more focused on their careers. So previously, young women would be expected to have children and stay at home. Now, that has changed over the last 30 or 40 years. You know, young women were more likely to have jobs in the 60s and 70s and 80s. But there was still this core section of society where the man would go out to work and the woman would stay at home. So you're more likely to have sex and have children. If you want to have children, you have to have sex, and therefore, you know, the cycle continues. Women now are much more likely to be focusing on their careers because they actually want to be high earners like men. I mean, I suppose they always did, but you get my point. Buying a house is expensive, so two incomes is better than one. And what this means is that women are putting off having children, which means they're having less sex. Because even with contraception, there's still a risk that you might get pregnant. So you're less likely to have sex. Obviously, the less times you have sex, the less likely you are to get pregnant, even if you are on contraception. So again, it comes around to having better sex education. But I suppose the final question is this actually a problem? I don't necessarily think so. There was a time, especially in the 90s, all you'd see on telly was young people having carefree sex in like dramas and in, especially if you watch Channel 4. Channel 4 was known for this kind of thing. Think Game of Thrones, but without the quality production. So it was a culture of just sleeping around, right? Whereas that culture has changed for all the reasons which I've laid out. So has social media got a role to play in this? Maybe, because it's true that you don't have quite so many in real life interactions as maybe you did 30 or 40 years ago. But you know, you still have friends in real life. That still happens. People still have relationships. They still get married or have a civil partnership or just in a relationship and they have sex. It happens all the time. So is it really social media? I don't think so. But maybe you have some thoughts on this. Leave a comment down below. Why do you think that young people are having less sex? I'd love to know. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. You can do that just down below. Remember to subscribe because I make videos every single week. And hit that bell so you can be notified of when I release my next video. Thanks again, and I shall hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.